From Boca Raton, Florida, Rabbis Efrem Goldberg, Philip Moskowitz, and Josh Broide are taking you behind the Bima. The BRS rabbis schmooze about contemporary issues and talk to special guests who give a behind-the-scenes look at how they got to where they are and what keeps them going. Welcome to Behind the Bima.
It's Wednesday at 9 p.m. I am Rabbi Efrem Goldberg, joined by my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Josh Broide, and we're here to take you
behind the Bima.
We're here to take you behind the Bima, a very special Behind the Bima episode with Saul Blinkoff. Saul Blinkoff, animator,
Amazing
director,
guy.
Producer, Disney, DreamWorks,
voiceovers,
Netflix, Amazon, MTV, voiceovers, somebody who is deeply and profoundly steeped in Torah and navigates a complicated world, but is such a source of inspiration, a teacher and a mentor to so many. Really excited to go behind the Bima with him and learn more about his journey and his encouragement, how we can navigate the complicated world, and his view and take on so many things. Really excited. But until then, Rabbi Broide, what's going on in your life?
Well, in a crazy world that we're in right now, officially we are in bear market territory. There are still some bright things happening. Someone's getting married. I know big simcha is coming up in our community. We're all very, very excited. And what's it like to count down to this one? How is this one different than the others?
Yeah, they're all exciting. I mean, we don't take for granted. We wish and bless everybody who is looking to get married or have people in their family get married. Everybody should meet their basher and experience and celebrate only happiness. For us, it's an enormous joy. It's a great privilege. A little bit of a super speed one. As everyone.
Is that easier or that's more complicated when it's so quick?
For me, it's all easy.
For your wife and your daughter.
Me, it's all easy. I don't have to get a gown or worry about hair and makeup, so it's pretty easy for me. Do
you get a new tie or not even a new tie?
I get a new tie. Everyone has a different frame or context. So someone said to me, your daughter, they went on their first date after opening day and they're getting married before the All-Star break. So you have no idea what those words even mean.
I don't know what that means.
For somebody with a baseball context to life, they met after opening day and they're getting married. But in fact, just last night where I am, I went to a really late Marav and I saw a young person. They said, Mazel Tov. I said, thanks so much. Actually, that's why we're here now. I said, what do you mean that's why you're here now? Like for the engagement? I go, no, the wedding. Like I'm wishing you Mazel Tov on the engagement. They just got engaged. I'm like, actually, well, they're getting married. So
let me just redo the card. It was an engagement card. Let me just get a wedding card.
Yeah. Everybody has to figure out what works for them. I don't think there's a right or wrong, and there's no judgment in either direction, too slow, too fast. But here's my takeaway is that it takes however long you give yourself to plan a simcha, an event. So if you give yourself 3 years, you'll spend 3 years obsessing and pursuing and debating and meeting. And if you give yourself 3 weeks, then you'll get it done in 3 weeks. So, my feeling, again, we shouldn't rush engagements. Each of relationships needs stages. They're important. Dating is an important stage. Courtship, engagement, they're all important stages. They shouldn't be rushed, and everyone's got to figure out their own way. This is not a general statement for others. But I do believe that if people are ready, if you can get it done quickly, in our case, it was, let's have a beautiful wedding and a happily married couple, and then we'll have a beautiful summer. Or it can be after the summer, in which case we'll have a miserable summer of planning and organizing or whatever. So it takes however long you give yourself. Some might argue that's an oversimplification, some with many more responsibilities towards this event. But I really do think, and I think others were persuaded, which is why we've done it this way, and I think they're happy they did. And, we've got phenomenal machatanim who are old, dear friends, and so it's easy, it's exciting, it's beautiful, and I wish and bless everybody. We should have only happy occasions, and each time it's amazingly emotional. We're a week countdown now, and to so to say goodbye to your daughter and hand her off, and obviously they don't go anywhere. That Baruch Hashem, you have a very happily, beautifully married couple, but it's a different stage.
You said that the machatanim are old friends. Did you know the future son-in-law?
I did not. We go back a really long way, but we haven't necessarily been very in touch more recently. So it's really amazing to have that history and to feel that connection and to share so much. And our new son-in-law is fantastic. First of all,
is he a little intimidated at all? Was there like that intimidation factor where he's like Rabbi Goldberg?
I don't. First of all, his father's a prominent mechanech and a master educator and principal at DRS. So I think he grew up in such a home and has been exposed to such leadership. And I don't think I'm a intimidating person in the least. So I don't think there was any of that. Also, he's 6'4" and I'm not. So, it's nice to look up physically someone, and he helps the Goldberg basketball team. So we're excited about that.
That's great.
And so I sent our listeners should know I was somewhere and I saw a store named Under 5'10".
Yeah.
So I took a picture and sent it to Rabbi Broide. It's men's clothing for men under 5'10". So
you saw what I wrote back to you. I said, that's not going to help me. I need under 5'5". But I happen to know the guy that owns that. I think there's a chain of them. Is Ellie Robinson? Is a guy from near Yaakov started that.
Yeah. There's I'll pose this question as a thought-provoking question, and then I want to bring on our guest and have this conversation with Saul, who really is so amazing, and the reason so many are tuning in. But there's where I am right now, there are so many resources for davening. There's a shul that started a davening on the hour. So from the earliest you could daven mincha every day, there's mincha every hour on the hour, then marav every hour on the hour. And the schedule on Shabbos is like 5 minchas on Shabbos, 3 maravs, 10 minutes before Shabbos is over, when Shabbos is over, Rabbeinu Tam, the later time for when Shabbos is over. And I look at it and I say, wow, that's so convenient. You can wake up anytime in the morning, afternoon, night. You can chop them. It's amazing. It's unbelievably convenient. On the other hand, what does it do to community? Meaning when you have a mincha marav or a couple of them, so you see the same people, the regular, someone notices, hey, I didn't see you at mincha. Maybe you're all learning together with a certain learning, siddur snippets or something else between mincha marav. So I don't know, it just got me thinking a lot about convenience versus community. Right. Can you have convenience without sacrificing community? Can you maintain community even while introducing lots of modes of convenience? It's an interesting question. It's a post-corona. One of the things corona taught us is everything was convenient. Having very local minyanim at the times that you want and rolling out of bed or not going to minyan because when the world was shut down and you couldn't, it was the ultimate in convenience and comfort. Sure. How do we find that balance between convenience, comfort, and community in terms of the prioritize and in terms of how we blend them and how we find that balance between them?
Right. There was a time on Shabbos afternoon we had 1 mincha, and now we have 3 or 4, and you end up having minyanim in the evening, and there's earlier minyanim and later minyanim.
I guess someone could criticize us on a Shabbos morning. We have 8 minyanim, so there are 8 choices, and we don't believe in putting people in a box. We let people choose what they want, and so someone could say that's us. I'm not even coming to a conclusion. I am not offering an opinion. I'm just telling you how I responded, how I felt, and I've been sort of thinking about it since then. Is that would be, and for me right now, is incredibly convenient. But hey, what's left of feeling like you're part of community, and which one is more important, and how do you find the balance between them? There's no opinion or judgment of them. Another thing that was in the news, the Jewish news this week, an arena in Philadelphia was rented out, and there was a celebration of Torah. No siyum. Wasn't a siyum hashas. Wasn't a major milestone. BMG, Beis Medrash Gavol Lakewood, it's 8,000 students, took over the arena, sports arena in Philadelphia, and filled it to capacity. 20,000 people just celebrating Giborei Koach, Giborei Torah. They were just celebrating Torah learners, celebrating the centrality, the primacy, the significance, the learning of Torah. And it got me thinking a lot again.
Was it tied to any dates or anything significant?
No. There was a reason for it that precipitated it, but there's no major milestone it was marking. There's no siyum conclusion of learning that it was marking. And that's what partially, I think, what made it so beautiful is there was no reason other than let's get together and celebrate Torah. Let's celebrate the learning, the significance of Torah and what it means. And it got me thinking, I'm a big advocate. We've talked about on the show and others, the notion of the Shar HaKolel, of not being in a box, of not being labeled, but of feeling you're part of the whole Jewish people. You're part of the entire total Jewish people, religious and non-religious. You're part of the whole Orthodox community with its different stripes and different segments and different spectrum of orthodoxy. And to say, you know what, I have my beliefs and I have my values, but I don't need a label and I don't need to be different. It doesn't have to be the other, that I'm part of everything. Because when I saw those videos or I watched that feeling, and I wanted to be there myself, I said, I'm also part of that. I'm part of Yom Yerushalayim, Yom Ha'atzmaut. I'm part of whatever, however you want to, I don't even want to try right now, but all the different parts of the Jewish world and the Orthodox world. Why be on the outside of something? Why not want to feel I'm an insider and part of so much? Why not want to be counted among those?
Correct.
When there's something that's so beautiful.
Correct.
So anyway, that reinforced my belief of that, because I'm not sure that outside the community that hosted that event, let's just say, I'm not sure that outside of them, if we would announce we're hosting an event for Torah, we could pack an arena with 20,000 people. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe they couldn't pack an arena to advocate for the state of Israel, and we could.
Right.
But life shouldn't be an either or. Why can't we go to both events? Why can't we go? There's no more policy conference, but why can't you go to an AIPAC policy conference and be with 18,000 people standing up and fighting for the state of Israel, and go to an arena with 20,000 people singing and dancing and celebrating Torah? Right. And it's not either or. You don't have to label me. You're that or that. I'm everything. Anyway, got me thinking. I'm just sharing deep thoughts.
I love it. Can't wait for next year. Gonna be some big things coming. It's great.
But those are all my thoughts for now. Really excited to bring on Saul Blinkoff, Hollywood filmmaker. He's worked for, as we said, Disney, DreamWorks, Netflix, Amazon, MTV, animated Disney films, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Mulan, Tarzan, Winnie the Pooh, many, many more. Award-winning and inspiring, observant, incredible person. So we're really, really excited to be able to welcome him on. So without any further ado, Saul Blinkoff. What a great honor it is to finally be joined and be together with the great Saul Blinkoff. When I say finally, it's because, Saul, we've been overlapping for years, and we have many mutual friends who've been trying to make introductions. We've not yet had the privilege to connect and to host you in our community, which we will, but at least it begins to go behind the Bima. So thank you for agreeing. Thank you for doing this with us.
Well, it is such a pleasure to finally meet you and Rabbi Broide. You and I have known each other a long time. And look, there's a great buzz with this incredible podcast, video podcast, YouTube channel, what you're creating. And it's just an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Saul, I want to dive right in. There's so much for our audience, for us to listen, to learn your story, your journey. And I know there's so much wisdom about success and motivation, your motto for life. We want to get into all that. But I want to come out the gate with the question I'm thinking, and I think many of you guys are thinking also, which is that, Saul Blinkoff, you're synonymous with this capacity to balance this incredible award-winning Hollywood career, animator, director, producer, Disney and Netflix and Amazon and DreamWorks, and this journey towards an observant Jewish way of life and raising such a beautiful family. I know your children are also involved a little bit in Hollywood as well, but you're raising them steeped in Torah Jewish values. Just a little bit. You're raising them, and you're living as a model of Torah values, Jewish values. And Hollywood seems, at least from an outsider's perspective, to be an increasingly complicated place to navigate, as Hollywood studios themselves are now taking political positions. They're taking moral positions. They're introducing relationships and identities and characters not entirely consistent with our tradition and view. How do you navigate all that? And how do you continue to raise your children in a way that you can have them be proud of your career and their involvement in that world, and at the same time not feel they're compromising or corrupting what is their beautiful Jewish identity and values too?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking the most important question. And it's such an important question because it's not just for me who lives in Hollywood, but it's for all of us. Wherever you live in the world, especially if you live in America, United States, there's influences. No matter where you live, there are influences. How do we keep those influences from changing our values? So for me personally, people ask me a lot, how do you balance living an observant Jewish life in Hollywood? How do you balance that? Well, it's very simple. It actually comes from, Pirkei Avos. You have to set up a fence for Torah. You have to set up a fence, and when I sat down years ago, I didn't grow up religious. I grew up kind of conservadox, I guess you could say, in New York. And when I started to become observant, I came out to LA and I met with Rabbi Shalom Denbo, who's a moil out here. And we sat down, this is, 20 years ago, with Pirkei Avos. He sat down and showed me that Mishnah of setting a fence for Torah. And I'll never forget, he says to me, "What does a fence do?" And I'm like, "Well, I guess it protects things." He goes, "What else does it do?" I'm like, "I don't know." He goes, "Well, it also keeps things out, right? It keeps things in and keeps things out." And the Mishnah says you have to set up a fence for Torah. What does that mean? Torah doesn't move. It's not like an animal. There's nothing trying to kill it, but Torah is your values. And that's something that we will be tested with every single day of our lives. And if we think that our values are safe, think again. There's going to be something that's going to test us. Do we protect them? By the way, I tell that to single people all the time. When you're dating, find out what a person's values are. How do you know what their values are? What is it that they value? Well, living in LA, living in Hollywood, especially today, I do see I see lots of things that make me nervous. First of all, like you mentioned before, that my kids are in the business a little bit. My son Asher, he's 13 now, but when he was 6, we noticed that he had a great voice and he could sing really well. And actually, his older sister, Meira, she also did some voiceover in some Disney shows. She did Phineas and Ferb, which was a very big animated show, if you know that show. And I remember taking my daughter to an audition once. She must have been about 6 or 7 years old. And we're in this audition, and there's all these kids and their moms. And it was I don't even remember what it was for, but I see all these girls who are like a year older than her with their own iPhones and they're like kind of ordering their parents around. The parents are like walking on eggshells around them. And I'm like, that's not how it's going to be in my family, And my wife and I made a decision at that moment. Like, I don't think we want her doing on camera stuff. Just voiceover would be the way to go. As a matter of fact, she had gotten cast on a major TV show. It was going to be a show called Outnumbered. It was going to be like the next Modern Family. Big show, huge show, out of hundreds of kids. And they picked this girl, our daughter, Meira. She must have been 5 at the time. And I remember we started negotiating the deal because they picked her. And the deal was going to be huge numbers. I mean, it would pay for her school, pay for her wedding, pay for her children's wedding. I mean, it would be huge. And I said to my wife, I'm like, well, before we sign this contract, you should probably remind her agent that she doesn't work on Shabbos. You should probably remind her that. I mean, she knows, like, we're from and all that, but you should probably tell her. So she tells her, and the agent's like, oh, but that's not going to work because they shoot on Friday. Because the way that they work in TV on this kind of thing is like Monday they get a script, Tuesday they learn it, Wednesday they block it out on the studio, and then blah, blah, blah. Friday they shoot it in front of a live studio audience for that kind of show. So she calls us back and she goes, I just spoke to them and they're going to pass on your daughter. I'm like, all right, that's how it's supposed to go. That was it. She calls us the next day and says, they called me back. They're changing the shooting schedule to Thursday. They think they can get it done in less time. They want your daughter for this show really badly. Wow. My wife and I hug each other. We're like, oh my God, it's amazing, right? And then I say to my wife, you should probably tell her that she doesn't work during the Chagim either. And then you look at the Chagim, Sukkot, Pesach, lots of Yom Tovs in there, right? So she goes, can you just give me the calendar of all the days she can't work? We send that to the manager. The manager goes, okay, this is crazy. It's so many days you can't work. Let me send it to them. I'll tell you what they say. She comes back to us an hour later. They're passing on your daughter. So they passed on her. So that was it.
Can I interrupt you there, Saul? Because what a lesson for your daughter, for children to grow up at a young age and say, my parents have instilled in me that Torah is worth compromising, sacrificing for.
Oh, yeah.
Fame, money, future, but it pales in comparison. So to instill and to model that, wow.
Yeah, and let me tell you,
and be unemployed.
And be unemployed, right. Well, let me tell you, first of all, a lot of people hear that story, and how many times have students come up to me, by the way? It happens all the time. I'll be speaking at a Shabbaton somewhere, NCSY. Some great kid will come up to me and be like, I got a job offer. I have this internship, but they say I have to work on Shabbat. What do you think I should do? And they ask it that way, right? And I say to them, well, here, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will say one thing. If you believe through and through that Torah is true and that the creator of the world has your best interest in mind by telling you you can't work on Shabbat, then there's no choice. But if you're not in a place right now where you find that that's reality, that God is real, that he wrote the Torah, then you're going to have to figure that journey out for yourself. I can't tell you, but I want to go back for a moment to my daughter's story. After that happened, I'm sitting at a Shabbos table, and one of my friends, who's a big writer in Hollywood, big writer, he was a writer on Shrek. His name is David Weiss. He speaks around the world. David's a great guy, incredible writer and director. And I was telling him what happened. And he said to me, tell me about that show. So I tell him about the show. He goes, who's directing that show? And I tell him who the director is. I'm not going to mention the name. He goes, you're the luckiest person in the world. Wow. I said, why? He says, because the last place you want your daughter ever being is on the set of one of that director's shows, because you can take everything that you've put into your child, all the values, all the nurturing that you and the school have put into this girl, and you could kiss it goodbye, because on the set of this person's shows, the language is crass. It's like, it's not the place you want to raise your kid. And by the way, he's so right, because the contract we had to sign, it was a 7-year contract. We would have had to take her out of school for 7 years. That's her whole childhood.
Right.
And they'd have a teacher from the school, like they have a teacher, like that's how they do it. Like there's a law. You have to have a teacher on set with them. And then you could bring in a tutor, but there goes everything. There goes everything. Forget homeschool. This is called set school. You don't want that, right? And it was from that and other experiences like that where my wife and I were like, that's it. It's not worth it. We don't want to put her in that situation. And we decided no more on camera. It would just be voiceover. And when my son eventually, as you mentioned before, my son has done some acting, he was cast at 6 years old as the voice of Dennis, the main kid in Hotel Transylvania 2.
Wow.
Eventually Hotel Transylvania 3 and 4. And it was a great, like, after school activity for him. He did, I mean, thank God, you know, it paid well, and it will pay for his yeshiva one day, even though sometimes he's like, no, I get that money when I turn 18. I'm like, that money's going right to your Torah education, young man. You know, it's not going for sports cars. That's what he did. I'm going to get a sports car. You ain't getting nothing.
Right.
You know, you get yourself a Honda Civic and you drive yourself to yeshiva. That's where you're going. Right. But I will tell you, when they had the premiere for his big movie, it was on Shabbos, and we told him, you know, he can't do that. So they, on a Sunday, like, gave him Sony Studios, got a huge theater, and invited all friends and family for a special premiere. And it was so cool, because when you went to Sony and you saw pictures of the cast of that movie on the wall, you had Adam Sandler, Selena Gomez, Andy Samberg, and Asher Blinkoff. You know? And as a matter of fact, one time it was Erev Shabbos. It's Friday afternoon.
That's crazy.
I pick him up from school, and we're hosting a big Shabbos meal that night. And my wife is like, honey, I know you just picked him up, but I just got a call from Sony Studios. They want you to bring Asher by. He's got to go record like 2 lines. I said, honey, I'm in the minivan. He just fell asleep. He's got his big felt kippah over his head. He fell asleep from school. Like, how am I going to wake this kid up to go do this? We got to get home for Shabbos. I got to set the table, because I'm a like OCD perfectionist when it comes to setting the table, right? Even though the kids can help, I know every fork has to be perfect. This is my own Michigas. Do you feel bad for my wife? Right? So I'm like, honey, I pick him up. I get over to Sony Studios, which is only like 5 minutes from our home. I pull into the guard gate. This is a huge movie studio. This isn't a building. This is like 50 sound stages. Each sound stage is the size of a gymnasium. Huge. And I know what they're going to do, because I've done this before. I'm going to have to pull in, check in. They're going to tell me to park right there. And then I have to walk him across 50 sound stages, like a huge, like, college campus, to get him to the sound stage where he's going to be recording that day. But he's asleep. I got to get home for Shabbos. So I say to the guy at the guard gate, I'm like, excuse me. He's like, yeah, can I help you? I'm like, yeah. I got the main character of Hotel Transylvania here. Do you mind if I just drive right? Like, can I just drive all the way right to the place? Because I know cars can go there, but it would really help me. He goes, well, who do you have? I go, well, I have Asher. He cuts me off and he goes, no problem. Bring him right in. I'm like, wow, thank you. As I'm pulling in, I hear him say to the other guard, do you know who he's got in there? Who? Usher.
Wow.
That's right. They thought I had the R&B rap star Usher. I did not correct them. They didn't know I had sleeping,
they didn't peek.
Mischievous boy in the back.
I love it.
So we made it home for Shabbos.
Peek.
But look, I'll tell you this. Like I said earlier, setting up fences, you know, I know what's valuable in the world. You know, movies are not the goal. Movies are a means to sharing stories that hopefully will impact the world. I can tell you, the first movie I directed at Disney was a Winnie the Pooh movie, Winnie the Pooh Springtime with Rue. I was reading the script, and there was a moment in that movie where I didn't feel like it was really reflecting Torah values. It wasn't the kind of values that I wanted my kids to have. So I changed the scene. I went with the writer, and we changed the scene. I wanted to show that a character was being more, that Roo, the little kangaroo, was being empathetic with Tigger, as opposed to Roo going, well, this is what I want. We changed the scene to, well, you know what? I feel really sad that he's sad. How do I help him get what he wants? You know, and it was with him and Rabbit. It was a whole Winnie the Pooh Easter movie. Actually, interesting. The first movie I directed was an Easter movie. That's another conversation. Actually, in that movie,
rumor has that you snuck some Jewish eggs into that movie.
Oh, you heard about, yeah, right. I put the Easter eggs, right? That's not interesting. They call them Easter eggs. Yeah, in that movie, it was the first movie I directed. I don't know, you know, people who are listening are aware, but like a lot of times Disney artists will hide things in the movies, right? They'll draw something in the movie that no one knows about. It's just in there, a little Easter egg, we call it. So some of them are real and some of them aren't. Some of them are fables or legends, which aren't so true, but some are.
It's like our high school yearbook. There's a ton of stuff in there.
Right?
We just get in there.
Stuff. Yeah. So I go over, I look at this drawing of the 100-acre wood where Winnie the Pooh lives. And Winnie the Pooh lives in a tree with a little door that opens up. And my job as the director is to look at this drawing, this layout, and see if the proportions of everything are correct. I'm like, yeah, that's good. And they want me to sign it because I sign it so it can go to the color department to be painted. So I sign it. Everyone's good. Everyone leaves the room, meeting over. The drawing is still in there. And I'm like, wait a minute. Don't Disney artists hide things in the movies? Let me do that. I take the pencil, sharpen the pencil, and next to Winnie the Pooh's door, I drew in a mezuzah. That's right. Now he's not Winnie the Pooh. He's Winnie the Jew. Right. And actually, the second movie I directed, Kronk's New Groove, the sequel to Emperor's New Groove, I was reading the script and it says Kronk gets married. I'm like, let's give him a chuppah. Why can't he be Jewish? And so I got my wedding album that had the calla lily flowers that my wife picked for our chuppah, you know. And when you see the movie, there's that scene where it's our chuppah, literally with the same flowers. He's got the kittel on, you know, or he's got the hat on. And he steps on the glass, right? Mazel tov. It's in the movie. Later on, by the way, years later, 15 years later, Disney has gone down that avenue where Kronk is Jewish. And there was a challah baking something online that someone sent me, like, because I don't work at Disney now, I'm at DreamWorks. But Disney did something where Kronk was baking challah or doing something with challah. This is about like a year and a half ago, I think. So, yeah, but look, you have to set up a fence for Torah to balance it. My kids know that I'm not going for the gold statue. I'm not into working for Oscars or awards or those kinds of accolades. I just try every day as a filmmaker to remind myself and identify not just as a filmmaker, but as a Jewish filmmaker. And how do I take those values that I buy into, believe, subscribe, and live and learn and put them into everything that I do? And you know, look, in today's day, it is difficult. You know, sometimes you look at Hollywood and the values are changing in a way I don't subscribe to in some ways. And, you know, I'm very careful about the projects that I take. You know, I try to stay in preschool, which I think is one of the safest places for me. But even that has had its challenges. So let's see what happens for tomorrow. But I will tell you that I do try to not just put the values into the work I do, but even in the leadership positions that I have. And, you know, people know, like, you know, I wear a kippah at work. You know, I worked, one of the first jobs I had was at MTV. You're talking 20 years ago. And let me just tell you, starting at Disney and then going to MTV. MTV was actually the first directing job. First, I started as an animator at Disney, 6 years. Then I went to MTV. I was living in Manhattan, living in the Upper West Side, in the Key West building. Some people listening know that building. My wife, then girlfriend, was at the Westmont across the street. Had amazing Shabbos there. But working at MTV, everyone around me every day was using swear words to communicate things that you did not need swear words to communicate. I'm not saying like a big heavy thing fell on your foot and you scream out, oh, whatever. It's like, hey, where the blank do you want to go to lunch? Right. Like this, it just became in the everyday. I mean, it wasn't like that at Disney, but at MTV, whatever the culture was, like people use swear words in almost every sentence until they met me. And I never told people not to swear, but when they saw, oh, this Jew wearing a kippah, they saw me as a rabbi, you know, because I wore a kippah. And all of a sudden, people stopped swearing. And one time there was a producer who slipped, and she goes, ooh, I'm sorry. I go, why'd you apologize to me? She goes, I didn't mean to do that in front of you. Again, I never told anyone to or not to.
So interesting.
But, you know, we have the responsibility to realize that we can elevate people around us just by trying to live a morally centered life.
It's a beautiful
Welcome
model
to
of
Hollywood.
outreach. Yeah, outreach
Yeah.
is not always,
Right.
the Bible codes in the front of the room and lecturing and preaching, but sometimes when you just are identifiable as
Yeah.
a Jew and you act that way. So I want to follow up with
By
a
the way,
little
I'll
bit of a
tell you
different question.
one other quick thing. One time I was recording actor Mark Hamill. Do you know who Mark Hamill is?
Sure.
What movie?
Mark Hamill was in
A little movie, a little known movie.
No. I know Mark Hamill.
Come on.
Like Star Wars.
There you go. Right. Star Wars. Rabbi Goldberg, he played a character you may have heard of called Luke Skywalker.
There you go.
One of the biggest.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that one. Right. So he comes in, he does a lot of voiceover, and we took a break. He was doing a voiceover for a movie I was directing, and we ordered all this kosher food because I was the director, and I had that ability to say, hey, let's get kosher food. And all the burgers we had this packaging that had kasher in Hebrew or in the packaging ever. And he's like, what is this? And he looks to me because I got the coupon. I'm like, well, this is Hebrew. It means kosher. And he goes, oh, what's kosher? How do they kill the pig? I'm like, no, they don't eat pig. We don't eat pig. We're explaining the whole thing. But I became Luke Skywalker's Rebbe. I was the real Yoda for at least that day.
So you were able to say, Luke, I am your rabbi. Anyway, yeah. So for the record, I was not trying to look like I'm really from I don't know movies. I had a Return of the Jedi birthday party as a kid. I just don't know the names of actors. I just don't know the names of actors.
No worries. You're better off not knowing.
I want to follow up that, they say, I think it's true because it's been documented, the head of a lot of technology companies who the technology is designed to create an addictive response in us, social media, technology, smartphones, that many of the CEOs and founders of these companies in their own homes and their own children, they don't allow their kids to use these devices. They have incredible boundaries around them. They know what they're intentionally doing to us, and they protect and inoculate their own children to it. So I would ask you similarly, as much as you're engrossed in or connected with the Hollywood scene, what kind of fences do you put for your children, your family, in terms of what level of culture, pop culture?
Best questions. I love it. Well, okay. Wow. Let's get going. Let's have some fun. You ready to have some fun, guys? Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So first of all, and this is just my personal opinions. Okay. I'm just sharing you my own opinion. This is me and my wife. This is our hashkafa. This is our outlook. These are the fences that we've set for our kids. I'm not telling you they're right for your kids, but we've put a lot of thought into it. First of all, I firmly believe that in this year, you cannot and should not. How about that? I'm going to come out that bold. You should not put your kids in a bubble where you give them no content. I remember years ago, I went to a very frum Rav's home. This is about 12 years ago. They didn't have a TV. They had no content. This is before iPhones. This is when laptops were around. And I was teaching their son guitar. He was 12 years old. And I'm in his room teaching him guitar. And he, as I come in the room, he's like, "Ooh, hold on, I got to put this under my bed." He has a laptop. And he was watching content his parents didn't know about on a laptop that they didn't even know he had at 12 years old. And I'm like, "What show are you watching?" He goes, "The show Friends." And I'm like, no 12-year-old from kid, or any kid for that matter, should ever be watching a show about, 5 20-year-olds that are just sleeping with people. And I mean, that's not appropriate, from or not. But guess what? His parents didn't know. He had a desire to watch this stuff, and how much stuff out there is being hidden. So my wife and I subscribe to the method of, we want to teach our children how to navigate the media world and the content world. You see, when I was becoming religious, we didn't have a TV. My wife and I, we our first home, we got married. We're like, we're not having a TV. But like today, you have an iPhone, you have a smartphone, you got a billion TVs. And they're playing live everything around the world at the same time. And don't think you're going to give your kids a flip phone and someday they're going to stay with unless they're living in Mea Sharim, the most religious community in the world. Unless they're in that community, there will be no desire to have any other phone than a flip phone. But if they're living anywhere else in the Jewish world, they're not going to buy. If they're going to have a career at all, you have to have a smartphone. I mean, I can tell you just for me in a creative field, I have work come in all the time, and I look at video, I look at audio, I look at graphics, I look at spreadsheets on my iPhone. It's a tool for work. But I do subscribe to the idea that you have to teach your children how to navigate it. So how do we do it? Well, it's easy to say to a kid, you will never watch any movies. it's harder to figure out what the movies are that are appropriate to sit with your kid and watch them together. It takes more time. But by the way, movies can be an incredibly powerful and effective tool to teaching Torah values. That's right, Torah values. Look at the movie like The Lion King. That movie is all about teaching responsibility. That movie is literally an example of lo sasuru acharei levavchem v'acharei nehem. Don't go after your eyes and your heart. Don't do what feels good. Don't think being a king means you can do whatever you want. Simba goes and lives in a Hakuna Matata world. You remember that? It means no responsibilities. You remember that song, Rabbi Goldberg, right? Hakuna Matata. Well, you've seen The Lion King, right? Come
Again,
on.
not because
so
I'm too religious. It's
so
not
you're
because
the
I'm
one
too
that
religious.
hasn't.
It's because I'm too cool. That's why, just to clarify.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
you've
I'm the
heard
one,
of the
exactly.
movie.
I most
You know
certainly
what
have.
you know what
I
happens
most
in the
certainly
movie.
have. And holding,
What happens to Mufasa, his dad? You remember? I don't want to spoil it for you. Although
Brody, help me out here.
It's been 30 years since the movie came out, so you deserve to have it spoiled. But okay, so Daddy dies. Did you know that Mufasa dies in The Lion King?
I did not know that.
Do you know how many people are watching this right now that can't believe you're saying that? You okay. Do you know who Luke Skywalker's father is, by the way? Just curious.
Darth Vader.
There you go.
All right, so you're back in.
You're saved.
Okay. So Lion King. Simba wants to be king one day. He wants to be king, and he thinks being a king is he can do whatever he wants. And Mufasa, his father, who is the king, says, Simba, there's more to being a king than getting your way all the time. Simba's like, there's more? What could be better? And then Daddy dies. Simba goes off to Hakuna Matata world. No responsibilities, and it's lush. It's the Garden of Eden. It's beautiful. Midway through the movie, one of the characters, Nala, shows up, and she's like, Simba, you got to come back with me. He's like, no, I'm staying here. She's like, no. You got to come back with me. Scar's taking over everything. Everyone's going to die if you don't come back, and you're responsible. He's like, I'm staying here. Hakuna Matata. Well, she leaves him. He's left alone. He sees his father's reflection. Remember who you are. Rabbi Goldberg, you need to see this movie. You're going to love it. Powerful movie. Watch it with the grandkids. You're going to love it. And he goes back, defeats Scar, and Lion King becomes the biggest animated movie of all time. BF, before Frozen. Why? Not because we love movies about lions, because that movie gives us a taste of what true greatness is. What is it? Taking responsibility for the world, taking achrayus. That's it. That's responsibility. And you can see those values in that. You want to teach a kid about that. You want to teach a kid about responsibility. How about the movie Cars? Cars is a Disney movie that shows it's all about the Yetzer Hara. There's no villain. It's about the Yetzer Hara. The villain's right here inside me. And you see, I'm not going to ruin this movie for you because you got to see it, but the ending of this movie is the most selfless, beautiful story you will ever see. It's incredible. So what am I saying? I'm saying that as parents, we have to find the content that is appropriate for our kids, that is in line with the values, because they're going to find it anyway at the right age. So let's show them how to navigate it. We also have a little family minhag that we have a show that we watch together as a family. We don't just put our kids in front of a device and say, hey, go watch this. We watch it together. We hit pause. We talk about it. It's one of the greatest shows ever made. I think the frummest of the frummest Haredi family in the world. Maybe they shouldn't watch it, but everyone else should. It's a great, great show for frum families to watch together with their kids. It's called, here we go. Josh, you ready?
I'm ready.
It stars Charles Ingalls, Laura Ingalls, Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, there you go. Look at that. He came in strong there.
Right?
Oh, it's a classic.
Possible the Goldbergs have the DVD set of Little House.
And how great is that show, Rav?
Michael Landon.
That show has solid Judeo-Christian values. And it's every episode. There's so much Torah in every episode. And to watch it as a family. By the way, I have parents, they'll say to me, but my 8-year-old would never watch that. Well, that's because you've already shown them things that they shouldn't be watching at that age. If you start them slow and watch things together, you decide what they watch. By the way, I have parents all the time. They'll be like, well, I showed my kid Lion King. They're 6 years old. How can you show a 6-year-old Lion King? They're too young to see that scene where Simba comes up with the dead body of his father and he's crying. They'll be like, well, I fast forward through that. Like, well, then you just killed the movie. You just killed the movie, because now they're never going to go through the emotion of experiencing that scene and seeing the ending. So you don't show them that movie at 6. You show them that movie at 12 when it's the right age for them. Don't think just because something's animated that it's appropriate. So what do you have to do as a parent? You got to do the research. How do you do it? You go to this website, IMDB Parents Guide. You type in any movie, Mary Poppins, and then type in IMDB Parents Guide. Boom. They will show you everything that's in that movie that could possibly be inappropriate, whether it's language or anything that's inappropriate visually. That'll list it right in there. There's also an incredible app, which my wife and I discovered this year, called VidAngel. Have you guys heard of VidAngel?
No.
You pay like $6-7 a month for it, yet something else to take our money, but it lets you watch movies or things that are on Netflix or whatever, and it takes out whatever you think is inappropriate. You go to this page and you click on, I don't want them to hear that word. I don't want them to see that thing that's inappropriate. You decide what your parameters are. It re-edits the movie. Cobra Kai. They could watch Cobra Kai now because we're a big Karate Kid family, but they couldn't watch that before because there's all this inappropriate stuff.
It re-edits the movie. It doesn't just populate a list of movies that don't have that in it.
It re-edits it live so you can watch it, and it has all your restrictions. Boom. So my kids can now watch Cobra Kai. Anyway, so
you said you feel that parents not only could but they should expose or allow their children in an appropriate way because they're going to go anyway. Would you say equally in the other direction that parents should not allow children unfettered access to culture, pop culture, kids who have devices that
you got to be careful. Well, I mean, first of all, it's obvious you got to set up, there's all these restrictions you can set up as far as inappropriate language, inappropriate music, if it's got that little E for explicit lyrics. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You got to set up those fences, and in all of our devices, there are those preferences where you can take out everything that's inappropriate. I mean, I don't have my kids, they can't get to anything rated R on their devices. That's number one. All the websites that they're able to go to are not anything that's explicit in any way. There's all those fences you can put on those. But you know what? Let me just say, let's put all that aside for a second. You got to raise kids that you trust. You have to raise kids that trust themselves. It's not just about putting fences up constantly around them, because then they're going to be like, well, you're not letting me choose anything anyway. You're just controlling everything. I mean, we have 2 high school girls, and we have a huge amount of trust with them. And, they know what's appropriate. They know what's not. One of my kids gets something that's sent to their phone. They're like, Mom, Dad, can I open this? I'm like, no. Can I open this? Yeah. If they don't know, they ask us because they know that we're partnering with them to help them stay yashar and straight on that path. So that's the whole thing. It's not just setting up fences to keep them limited where they can't do anything. It's ultimately creating a relationship with them where they feel comfortable, open, and eager to engage and to bring their parents in to help them navigate this big, crazy world of content. And by the way, let me end with one thing. Even if you had Uncle Moishy videos and all the Frum videos of the world, I still don't think it's a healthy thing to have our kids on devices every day anyway. Right? It's still not, look, you have to have a little bit of it, but I think you have to be careful how much. It's like our kids, they do other things. There's art in our home. There's music in our home. We go outside. We go to the park. We go to the beach. We live in LA, right? We go to Malibu. We go hiking. There's so much to do. And I will say, as parents who are listening, know it's quite often very easy to give your kid a device because you want to catch up on work or cleaning the home or whatever you're doing. And how do I occupy my kid for an hour? Let me give them an iPad and go into the other room and close the door. And sometimes that's something we need to do, but sometimes it's what I call subscribing to lazy parenting. Yeah, it may be easier, but it doesn't always mean it's better. Yes, it takes more work from us to be able to engage our own kids. We can't leave it to the devices, whether they're watching kosher content or not. It still has to be a limitation.
Technology, yeah. I have a million questions for Luke Skywalker's Rabbi, but I'm going to let Broide jump in here.
Let's go.
Let me just a quick question. You mentioned before about taking responsibility. There are many, many Jewish men and women in our Orthodox communities that are professionals. They're not necessarily working in DreamWorks, but there are a few that I can name. Let's say like Charlie Harari, who's involved in business and finance.
Good friend of mine, like a brother.
Great friend of yours.
Yeah.
Right? You got Harry, the lawyer. You got Ari Shabbat, again, business.
Right.
There's a few of you guys that have taken responsibility to teach, in spite of the fact you're not rabbis. You go out there and you really feel like a achrayus, like a responsibility to be there for those. It's almost like another job, or maybe it's the same job. But so where does that come from? And why aren't there more? Men and women doing that in
tell our listeners where you're teaching and what capacity, all those people and you in particular.
Well, Charlie Harari, Harry Rothberg, Ari Shabbat, and I are 4 trip leaders. We're trip leaders on a program called Momentum, which Josh knows a lot about. And Momentum is a program where we take a couple times a year 100 or so dads to Israel who are not religious. We take them to Israel, and it's basically a boot camp to not just show them the land of Israel and the Jewish people, but to give them a boot camp of tools to help them become better men, better fathers, better husbands. By the way, it stemmed off of the women's program, the Momentum program, formerly known as the JWRP. And that was founded by, Lori Plotnick and her team. And that was a program where they would take all these, unaffiliated women to Israel, get them inspired by embracing their Jewish identity. When they come home, the goal was they can now change their home, change their community, change the world. So once these women, and you have over 30,000 women have gone already. It's incredible. It's incredible. So then the husbands were like, well, what about for us? Or also you have these women who are coming home and they're like, yeah, well, now we're inspired to keep Shabbat or maybe light Shabbat candles. But what about our husbands? We need a trip for them. So Charlie Harari started it. And then they brought me in, and then Harry and Ari. And now what we do, like Josh was saying, was we'll take these guys to Israel and we will show them not just the land and show them the potential of who they can be. And the reason it's effective is because we're not rabbis. Someone hears the word rabbi in front of a name, with all due respect to the both of you, and the rabbi gets in front of an audience, a class, a group of people, and people think a rabbi has an agenda, especially if the rabbi is wearing a kippah. They want to get me religious, but they're a rabbi. And there's already a chasm of space between the rabbi and me. But if they see someone like Charlie Harari or Ari Shabbat or me or Harry in front of them, they're like, hey, this looks like a normal guy. He's wearing a baseball hat, This is a normal guy. This is the kind of guy, like I could hang out with this guy. And that's really what the goal is to show these guys that, you can, like you said, Rabbi Broide, perfectly, you can live in the world and yet embrace your Jewish identity. And by the way, that's the one goal I have when I do lead my trips. And whenever I speak, I speak here locally in Los Angeles. I also travel, as you know, I speak around the world, around the Jewish world, and even the secular world now. I'm speaking now for corporations and doing keynotes. And no matter where I speak, if it's the Jewish world, I have one goal, just one goal. How do I say something that will inspire the listener to embrace their Jewish identity and not just want to be Jewish, but want to live Jewish? That's the goal. How do I take my Jewish identity and let that transform the way that I live? Maybe it'll be lighting Shabbat candles. Maybe it'll be just that something comes up on the news on Israel and I go, hey, that's not just happening in a place far away. That's happening in a place that I connect to, that my grandparents have connected to. That'll mean something to me. Maybe I'll listen to that a little bit more. Or how do I bring Jewish values into my home? I'll just give you an example. We talked about the mezuzah in the Winnie the Pooh world. I hit a mezuzah in the movie. I remember when I learned about mezuzah, I knew what a mezuzah was growing up, but I didn't really know the purpose of it. When I went to Israel in the mid-90s, I was animating on the film Mulan, the big Disney movie. And I get to Israel, and I learn with these 2 rabbis for 10 days, Rabbi Benny Friedman and Rabbi David Aaron, right? Yeah, they have a program now, a yeshiva called Araita. And it was the 2 of them, along with Rabbi Nathan Lopez Cardoza, who is an incredible, brilliant Rav. And I remember Benny walks in, Rabbi Friedman walks in, and he starts talking to us about mezuzah. And he says, what's in the mezuzah? It's part of the Torah. It's the Shema. And the Shema comes from the Torah, which is a love letter from God to humanity. It was beautiful. Then he said this to us. He goes, why would we take Torah, which is the most valuable thing we have, and why would we be commanded to put it on a doorway? It doesn't make sense. Think about the most valuable things that you have in your home. You're not putting them in doorways. They're in a safe. right? They're at least on a wall with a frame. Why are we taking the Shema, which is the mantra of the Jewish people, the last words we will ever utter, and we're commanded to take them and put it on a doorway? This is what the Rav said. He said, a mezuzah is not a thing that we put on a doorway. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. I'm going out into the world. There's a mezuzah to remind me to stop for a moment and ask myself a question. I'm going out into the world. What kind of a world do I want to create? What am I living for? You come into your house at the end of the day. You're about to come into your home. You know, I work in Hollywood. People think, oh, he's got a cool job. Oh, he has a cool job. He lives in Hollywood. There's palm trees where he lives. He gets to hang out with Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, right? All these amazing people. Some days, quite often, I'm driving home from DreamWorks or Disney or wherever I'm working, and I've had, believe it or not, a hard day. Yeah, that's because it's still called work. And what makes it difficult? Well, it's hard to write movies. It's hard to direct movies. It's also hard to work with people. We all have that in our lives. And sometimes I could pull through that canyon because you have to drive through Coldwater Canyon to get back to the Beverly Hills area. I'm about to walk into my home. I've had a tough day. I'm about to walk in. I could open that door, come in, and my wife could see my face. You're like, oh, I could tell he's had a tough day. Let daddy sit in his chair. Everyone, all the kids, leave him alone. Kids, leave him alone. Leave daddy alone. My wife could, and I could be like, huffing and sighing, and honey, I need a cold drink. Everyone, just keep everyone away from me. I've had a hard day. Yeah, but I'm a Jew. You know what that means? There's a mezuzah there. That means before I come into my home, that mezuzah can remind me, oh, you know what? You had a tough day? How about this? Grow up. Grow up. Why don't you keep your tough day at the door? And the first thing when you come in is go over to your wife and say to her, honey, what kind of a day did you have? Oh, because it has to all be about you? No, there's mezuzahs that remind you to grow up. Or what about this? I'm going to walk in. What about my 9-year-old daughter, Naomi? What, she can't have a tough day? What, it's easy to be a 9-year-old? No, she goes through emotions even more than I do. So I'm going to leave that at the door. That mezuzah is a reminder. Leave it at the door. You see, that's what I remember learning years ago that Torah is. It's not a history book. Beautiful thing that Reb Noach Weinberg said, who started Eshet Torah, which had a big impact on my life, is he taught so beautifully. Torah is Torah's Chaim, tools for living. It's like there's a mezuzah. You're commanded to put one there. Why? To help us before we go out into the world, to clarify, what am I living for? To come into my home and stop for a moment and go, wait a minute. What kind of a home do I want to create? What are the values I want to have in my home? Why do I need a partner to help me create a home? Torah became tools for living to help me elevate every aspect of my life. And that's one of the things that I love to share with students that I meet, either one-on-one or communities that I get to lucky enough to go share my stories with. And that's always first and foremost the goal.
So let's take a step back. First of all, it's amazing. Thank you. Everything you're sharing is really inspiring and really thought-provoking. And, there's room for debate. Not everybody's going to agree with everything, particularly as we relate to culture and standards and family. But I think the conversation is so refreshing and healthy, and you're really in a position more than most to have it. Walk us through, what's the difference between an animator, director, producer? I would think that being a good animator, being creative and artistic doesn't necessarily make you a great director or producer. Are those similar skill sets, different skill sets? And how did you know that you have both? How did it emerge for you to have both? Which one do you enjoy more? What are you still doing these days?
First of all, this podcast, do you call this a podcast? It's a podcast, right? Yeah, it's a podcast, right? So this podcast could go on for 4 hours because you guys literally are asking the best questions I've ever been asked. I'm not kidding. Wow, thank you. For real. I mean, these are thought-provoking, and I've never been asked that question. You
should see how much time he puts into preparing these questions. Maybe that's
absolutely. Absolutely.
He's great.
Well, I'll tell you quickly. So, look, when I grew up, I wanted to be an artist. I was trained in drawing. That's what it was. It was drawing. Then when I went to art school, it was drawing from life, drawing humans and animals from life, going to cafes, going to bus stops, going to the zoo, drawing elephants, everything drawing from life. That's the portfolio that got me into Disney. People think in order to get into Disney, you have to draw cartoon characters. They say, don't draw any cartoon characters, no Mickey Mouse, oh boy, they don't want any of that, right? They want you to draw from life. Once I got into Disney, I was studying animation. I never animated anything until they taught me animation. Animation is not just how well you draw. It's the acting. It's the performance that you put into drawing after drawing. You could be an incredible draftsman, draw like a camera, like perfectly, like the way a camera takes a picture, you could draw that well. Photo real. It doesn't mean you can animate. You can animate really well. It doesn't mean you'll be a great animator because you may not be a great actor. We always say animators are actors with pencils. You know, one of the greatest animators of all time is a guy named Glenn Keane. I got to share the story with you guys. You got to hear this. Glenn Keane is the Michael Jordan of animators. And I found out years ago that he used a certain pencil. And I thought if I could get the pencil when I was in art school, if I could get the pencil that Glenn Keane uses, I could draw like Glenn Keane. So I've tracked
let me tell you, Rabbi Goldberg has a pen that he uses to write all his sermons. I tried grabbing that pen. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Well, so what happens? I find out the pencil that Glenn Keane uses gets discontinued. They can't get him anywhere. You can't find him, nothing. On the first movie I work on at Disney under Glenn Keane's leadership is Pocahontas. I get called into Glenn Keane's office. He's showing me how to draw Pocahontas. Remember, this guy animated Aladdin, The Beast and Beauty and the Beast, Tarzan, right? Little Mermaid. These are his characters. You've heard of them, right? Big animator, the man. And as he's drawing, I'm distracted because I'm staring at the pencil. He's like, what? I'm like, is that the pencil? He's like, yeah, that's the pencil. Like, wow, can I hold that? He's like, yeah, here we go. It's got teeth marks in it. It's amazing. And to me, you know, it was like Michelangelo's paintbrush. It's incredible. And as I'm holding it, he looks at me and goes, Saul, it's not the pencil that makes the animator. He told me that when he started at Disney, Disney had what was known as the 9 old men. These were the guys that animated Dumbo, Pinocchio, Fantasia. He goes, they taught me 2 words and I wrote them on my desk and now I'm going to teach them to you. And he pointed to these 2 words and the words were, be sincere. He said, if you don't feel it, they won't feel it. You know what makes Glenn Keane's animation incredible when he animates Aladdin or the Beast or Tarzan or any of these characters? It's not how well he draws. It's he feels what he's doing. He puts it all out there and he feels it. I mean, he used to walk through the studio with a cape, running through the studio with a cape to see how a cape would settle because he was animating the Beast and Beauty and the Beast. Incredible. You have to put your sincerity into your work. Well, I loved that. That really taught me how to draw and what to put into my animation. But eventually, the thing that really got me going was being a filmmaker, a director. That's the thing where I get to wear all the hats. My love of music, art direction, cameras, lenses. How do you move the camera to tell the story? As a matter of fact, the way it really happened was it was during the movie Mulan. I was animating Shang. He's the main character, the main guy that Mulan loves. And during that song, let's get down to business to defeat the Huns. Rabbi Broide, you know the song or no?
Not this one.
Before your time. Not this one, Blinkoff. You had me there, but you went a little too far back to the olden days, as my kids said. No problem.
You go back to Fantasia, you know, maybe I can pick up a few.
Right. Well, I was working on Mulan, and Mulan, we animated that movie in Florida, completely at the Florida studio, because at that point we had 3 Disney animation studios, one in Florida, Paris, and LA. And the actors for Mulan were actors from LA. And the guy that did the voice for the villain, Miguel Ferrara, had this deep voice. Eddie Murphy was in the movie. He did the voice for Mushu. But whenever they didn't have the actors in LA to do the voices, because we made the movie entirely in Florida, they wanted to have animators do the voices that they could just time the animation to, and then they replace it with the actor's voice later. So they had auditions in the studio for animators to do voiceovers. It's called temp voices, temporary, before they got the actors in. So I auditioned. I was like 23 years old. I auditioned, and I got cast as the role of the villain, Shan Yu, in Mulan. And I thought it was the coolest experience. I went into the soundstage, into this recording studio. The directors of Mulan were there, just the way they were directing me, the way they would direct anybody. And I had to go through these lines. I'll do one of the lines for you right now that none of you will know, but I'll do the line for you anyway. There's a line in the movie. Let's see if I can still do the voice, where Shan Yu says, "A little girl will be missing her doll. We should return it to her." Or here's another one my kids love. I do this before they go to bed. Here we go. "How many men does it take to deliver a message?" So that's his voice, like a really deep voice.
Do people ask you to like record their voicemails?
Sometimes, I used to do a bunch of voices. I do a lot of the Winnie the Pooh voices too.
That's
Like, how you doing, rude boy? That's my Tigger. I do lots of little voices. Or Eeyore, thanks for noticing me. Or Rabbit, no, Pooh, do it like this. Lots of little fun voices. So anyway, I go into the studio to record some of these voices, and the directors are directing me. And as they're directing me, the light switch went off. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to do what they're doing. I can do that. And from there, I made a short film, which got me my first directing job at MTV, and ultimately returned to Disney as a director. I did lots of Disney movies and directed a Disney show called Doc McStuffins, which you guys might know, or maybe not. A little before your time, Josh. That's okay. And got to work on a lot of fun stuff. But the difference basically between animator is really the actor. The director is really responsible for all the storytelling. And many animators do not want to be directors. If you think of Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg, they're very different roles. Right. But so I'm
producer. And talk to us about producer then.
Well, there's many kinds of producers. I'm a supervising producer, a creative producer. There's some producers called line producers. They're the ones that handle the budgeting and the schedules. That's not me. I'm not into the Excel sheets. That's not me, right? I'm into the creative. So what I do as an executive producer or a supervising producer, creative producer, is oversee the storytelling, whether it's the scripts or working with writers or other producers, working with them on the scripts, the art direction, the music, working with composers, songwriters, camera, all that stuff to just make sure the story is emotional and really delivers a powerful message.
So you shared a little bit your story in terms of Rav Bini, Rav Noach, and some of the things that attracted you in the Upper West Side. And one of the things, to go behind the Bima for a moment, we were talking before, we could find your story. You've spoken in so many places, and your story is so inspirational. People can listen elsewhere. And we try to, on Behind the Bima, ask the questions maybe others don't ask, or have a conversation on people's minds. But that said, give us sort of the quick version of what made you fall in love. What is it about observant Judaism? I know you went to Camp Ramah. You mentioned you had a conservative Orthodox upbringing. You were a proud Jew. It wasn't that you were disconnected and you had your first bowl of cholent and you said, this is it. But something did pivot you in a little bit of a different direction that's changed your life. So what is it? Because there are a lot of people who grow up in the religious world and they want out and they want to run to Hollywood. They're like, I could find, if I had Hollywood, I'd be happy. Religion is making me unhappy. If I had Hollywood, I'd have happiness. You have Hollywood, and yet you ran to religion. So what was it that attracted you?
Yeah. Another great question. Like, boom, you did it. Another fantastic question. It's funny. I talk to my mom about this a lot, and hopefully she'll listen to this episode and she'll know that we talk about this a lot. She tells me when I was a kid, is like, I wasn't so open to hearing so much about the meaning behind what Judaism really was. I was a normal kid. I was out there playing sports or drawing or doing something I shouldn't have been doing when I was 10, 11 years old. I wasn't like, hey, will you teach me about mezuzah? Like, I wouldn't have sat there. Right. I think the thing that did it for me is when I was in my mid-20s, I'd got my dream job as a Disney animator, and I had seemingly everything I ever could have wanted. When I was living in the happiest place on earth. That's what they call Disney World. I was making great money. I bought a sports car. I was in a jacuzzi, a pool. I had my friends. I was living the life of everything that someone could want in life. And I'd worked so hard to get it, with lots of rejection along the way. And when I was there and I reached seemingly the top of this mountain, it just wasn't enough. There was something missing. And that's when I remembered a couple years earlier, it was during the making of Hunchback of Notre Dame, when I was in Israel with my parents for a week, and I met someone who was in a yeshiva program. I remember meeting this guy in a bagel place, and we were talking, and I said, what are you doing in Israel? Because we were talking about sports and stuff. He goes, well, this is what he said. He goes, I just want to find out how I fit in to the Jewish people. And I remember going, what do you mean by that? And this is what he said. He said, I was raised a certain way that my parents decided Jewishly. My parents decided what synagogue we were going to go to, what we were going to eat in the house, out of the house. Everything about how I live as a Jew was decided by my mom and dad. He said, now that I'm becoming an adult, I want to find out what Judaism means to me. And when he said that, I remember being a little envious, but I'm like, I would never have the time to be able to go to Israel and learn. I go back, finish working on Hunchback, then I work on Mulan, And between Mulan and Tarzan, I had this break of like 6 months of what we call downtime. You get paid to do nothing because they were working on the script. They weren't ready for animators like me to come in and draw. So I had all this free time. So I was in one of these pools at Disney World. It was at the Beach Club Hotel. It's one of those lazy rivers, right? You don't even have to be alive and you can swim. I love those, right? And that's where I had everything I could have wanted, but something was gnawing at me. And I'm like, you know what? I got out of the pool and I'm like, I'm going to Israel. My friends are like, why are you going to Israel? None of my friends are Jewish. Like, why are you going to Israel? I'm like, because I want to find out how I fit into the Jewish people. They're like, what are you, a puzzle piece? I don't get it. I wanted to find out what Judaism meant to me. And I went on this program with these two rabbis, Rabbi Benny Friedman and Rabbi David Aaron. I'm telling you right now, when I stepped off that plane, if you would have told me that I was going to change my life after that, I would have told you you're crazy. I was just there to learn. I didn't realize I was there to grow, to change what I actually did, how I lived my life. After that trip, learning about Judaism, the light switch went off. It went off for me. I remember, and actually Rabbi Benny Friedman still tells the story. He remembers when it happened for me. A light switch went off for me that Torah is true. Boom. That Torah is not just a great piece of literature, that literally letter by letter, it's written by the creator of the world. Now, how did I believe that? How did I come to know that? I started learning it. That's what I tell people all the time. Never believe Torah is true because some person tells you it's true. Open it up and read it and see what it does for you. And once I realized Torah was true, it changed how I approached life. It was like, well, if Torah is true, the creator of the world is telling me that I should be keeping Shabbat. I better find out more what that is. And Friday nights, all I did Friday nights before my Israel trip was I went to movies with my friends. I worked in the movie business. That's what you did Friday nights. You went to, because movies always premiere. The first is always a Friday night. And me and my buddies were always 10 rows back, right in the middle, every Friday night. I mean, every Friday night. I come back from Israel. I tell my friends, I'm not going to movies anymore Friday night. And I went and bought myself a book. It's a bestseller. If you guys haven't heard of it, you should get it. It's called The Chumash. It's amazing. It's called Torah. And I get this book and I start opening it and I'm reading the parsha of the week, the portion of the week. And I'm connecting to the Jewish people around the world. And I loved it. I loved knowing that I was setting up this different life for myself. Friday night, I was going to have a taste of Shabbat. And yes, I grew up with Shabbat. And my mom lit Shabbos candles and my dad made Kiddush, but it was always my parents. And I have great nostalgia and great memories. But now that I was an adult, I wanted to find out what meaning I could glean from living this way myself and making it real. It's one of the things I learned from one of my Ravs, Rabbi Shalom Denbo, who I mentioned earlier. He always says to me, it's one thing to know something. It's another thing to make it real. Wow. To make it part of us. Look, we're commanded to say the Shema twice a day. So let's say the Shema every day. Why? To learn something new? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. I said it yesterday twice. I've been saying it since I was, 20 years. I'm not going to say it again today because I'm going to learn something new. If I told you a piece of information, right? Neville Chamberlain was the prime minister before Winston Churchill. You'd be like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay, cool. I want you to say it again tomorrow. Neville Chamberlain is that? You'd be like, well, you already told me. I know that already. We don't say the Shema because we need to know something. We need to say it because we have to make it real every single day. Because when I close my eyes and I say that sentence, which is the last sentence we hopefully will ever say in our lives, at the end of the Shema is actually a sentence in itself. Hashem Echad. God is one. That itself is a sentence in itself. That's actually the last sentence we will ever say. God is one. And you know what it means? God, you run the world. You run the world. And some days when I close my eyes at the end of the day and I say that, the day that I get a big promotion or I get a project to work on that excites me, I'm like, God, of course you run the world. Because look what you gave me, all this success. What about the days when I lose my job? Can I still say, God, you run the world? Well, that's when the test comes. And every day that I think I have it down, there'll be a new day tomorrow that's going to come to test me. And some days I might be thinking, oh, God, you run the world. Some days I might be thinking, oh, God, I'd like to think you run the world. That's okay, too. That's a real relationship. And that's what I started to learn. And that was the switch for me, that Torah is true. The creator of the world has my back in all things. And I try to make it real.
It's amazing. Wow. That really is. Yeah, I think we're all on fire listening to that. when you go speak in non-Jewish settings, you're doing the business circuit, the keynotes.
Yeah.
The messages there are about drive, ambition, success. What's the key takeaway?
No. It's a little bit of that, but let me tell you, I'm delivering a message that they don't hear. You know, in the secular world, the messages you will hear is go for abundance. How can you be more successful at career? How can you get that? It's all about that. I always say, even in those keynotes and even in those environments where it's not a Jewish talk at all, I always say to my audiences, don't go for a life of happiness, because what makes you happy may not be what's good for you. You look at Judaism for a second. What do we say at our New Year? We say Shana Tova. What do they say in the secular world? They say Happy New Year. They're giving each other a bracha. I got a bracha for you. I want you to have a year filled with happiness. We don't say that, because what makes you happy may not be what's good for you. What do we say? Shana Tova. You should have something better than happiness. Go for a life of goodness, because that exists. There's something out there called good and evil. And I want you to have good, not what you think is good. I want you to have what actually is good. And I say to these audiences all the time, go for something that's better than a life of happiness. Go for a life of meaning. And how do you have a life of meaning? It's not what you accomplish. It's what am I striving to accomplish? And it has to be one thing, not what am I getting? It has to be what am I sharing? What am I giving? How can I impact the world? Let's go back to Winston Churchill for a second. That's right. I'm throwing out Reb Churchill. You know what? He had an incredible quote. Listen to this quote. Amazing.
You just quoted him last week in the drasha, right?
That's right.
Yep.
Rabbi Goldberg, didn't you do it?
Yeah.
Did you, Rabbi?
Of course.
He has the best quotes, right? The best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me if you've heard this. This is one of my favorites. He says, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. That's the message I share. When I talk to organizations, companies, I'm like, don't think that life is about getting and getting and getting. Yeah, you should learn perseverance if you want to get, but it's who do I become along the way? How will I impact? How will I take responsibility to make an impact? You know, someday my kids, let's talk real for a second, they're going to see a gravestone and they're going to see my name. They're going to see my name, Yitzhak Ben Baruch, on a gravestone. What are they going to say? Oh, my dad worked on Disney movies? That was cool. No, that's not what they're going to care about. They're going to want to know one thing. Did my dad try to become a better father? Did my dad try to become a better human being? Did he care about other people? You know, I host a podcast called Life of Awesome. That's the name of the podcast. And everyone listening, that is a shameless plug. Go subscribe to my podcast, Life of Awesome. It's a podcast that has Jewish content, but it's all, I don't talk that it's Judaism. It's just Torah values. And what I do is I take movies and I bring movie clips in and show you life wisdom from film. And I play the clips from those movies. Incredible. It's so much fun. One of the guests I had on my podcast is a man named, let's see if you know who he is, George Foreman. Who is he?
Boxer, grill.
There you go. See,
is he known more today because of the grill or because of the boxing?
The grill.
The grill. This is where I get
like Goldberg. You're over 30,
sports,
so you say boxing, right? But yeah, today they just know him as the grill guy. But look at the guy's accolades for a second. Gold medal boxer winner. Gold medal. At 20 years old, becomes the heavyweight champion of the world, beating Smokin' Joe Frazier. 20 years later, becomes heavyweight champion again. That's never been done. The oldest to ever become heavyweight champion, George Foreman, does it again. Incredible. Yeah. Makes $138 million his first year on the grill. The guy is successful in everything that he touches. I get him on my podcast, and I say to him at the end of the episode, George, got one more question for you. What is the legacy you want your children to remember about you? What is the legacy you want the world to remember about you? Without blinking an eye, he says one thing. I want people to know that I loved human beings, that I loved humanity, that when I walk down the street, I could smile at someone and affect their day. That's all I want people to know about me. Boom. Incredible. Amazing. Wow. And then you got to hear this. This is crazy. You got to hear this. After I'm editing the episode, I find the fight, the night that he became heavyweight champion of the world, he was 20 years old. The day before that, he was in poverty. He grew up in poverty. No money, poor, on the streets. Right. He becomes heavyweight champion of the world, and in a second, he just won the lottery. He just got millions of dollars. He's in the ring like the end of a Rocky movie. Everyone's coming up to him. This is like a moment later. The emotions are flooding. He becomes heavyweight champion of the world, beating his idol, Smoking Joe Frazier. And in that moment, a sports commentator comes up to him with a microphone and says, George, you just became heavyweight champion of the world. What's next for you? What's going to be next? And George goes, the first thing out of his mouth, without even batting an eye, he says, the first thing is, I want to tell all the kids out there that you can achieve your dreams if you believe in yourself. That's the first thing out of his mouth is, I want to impact someone else. Not the first thing is like, wow, I'm so excited. Look what I did. Look what my accomplishment. No, first thing in his mind is, how do I take this position I'm in and impact another person? Right. And when he says that, check this out. The sports commentator doesn't like the answer. He's like, no, George. I don't mean that. No. I mean in the ring. What's next for you in the ring? And without batting an eye, George says, the world is my ring. And I'm going to spend every day of my life sharing this message.
Wow.
Boom. That means this guy had clarity. He knows what life is about. It's not about gold medal belts and grills. It's about, how do I take whatever position I'm in, use it as a responsibility to impact humanity.
Let me give a selfless plug back. When we had Mariano Rivera, the Hall of Fame New York Yankee champion, greatest closer of all time on Behind the Bima, and we kept talking baseball, and then we were up to what he's doing in life now, which is he's obviously retired from baseball, and he's a pastor. He's promoting God's name. I've never heard someone talk about loving God as much as he does. And he has this children's home, and he's advancing and working on behalf of children. And we're talking baseball, and he said a line also. He goes, baseball is just a game. What I'm doing now is life. Wow. And here you got a guy, first unanimous Hall of Fame baseball, right? Greatest pitcher of all time, closer of all time. Incredible. And he says, baseball is just a game. What I'm doing now, that's life. So sometimes people think if I climbed there, I'd be happy. And the people there, they're finding. You've been amazingly generous with your time. We could talk for hours and hours. I want to end with one last question, which is, you've overlapped. You've mentioned even some names, some Jewish celebrities, Jewish actors. Is there any Jewish actor, celebrity out there you've interacted with who has more Jewish depth than we would know? Anyone who you've had conversations, anyone whose Jewish identity is strong? You mentioned Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler weaves a lot of Judaism into his movies. Does he carry a strong Jewish identity? Could they be doing more to stand up for Israel? Are they knowledgeable Jews? Do you ever use your relationships to host for Shabbos meals or to try to encourage or promote more Judaism with them?
Yeah, look, it's hard. I mean, I Adam Sandler, I don't think he really does. It's hard to know what's going on in someone's heart, obviously, but in a public forum, he doesn't really embrace his Judaism other than in the novel song that he wrote. You know, what was the Hanukkah song? Right?
Put on your yarmulke.
Yeah, put it right. So but I will say, we all know Steven Spielberg made Schindler's List. But I just want, especially if there's any observant Jews listening, I want you to keep in mind that maybe he's not observant, maybe he doesn't keep Shabbos, but in his own way, he has done so much for the Jewish people, and his Jewish soul has come out in so many beautiful ways in the films that he's made. First of all, in collecting the biggest library of survivors from the Shoah, from the Holocaust, their testimonials. He's responsible for that. That's literally one man who collected, while most of them were still alive. We're talking the 80s he started, the biggest archive library, much bigger than Yad Vashem, of survivors' testimonies. That's a huge deal. That's number one. And I always go back to Schindler's List specifically because while it is a Holocaust story, there's that one moment when you see that little girl in the red dress. You remember that? Yeah. And there go the goosebumps.
I just got a chill when you said that.
Yeah. And it's just this scene. And by the way, anyone listening right now, just go turn on YouTube and type in girl in the red dress. Go to YouTube and just watch that 2-minute clip. It's man, I get emotional. I can't even. It's this scene. It's like they're gathering up the Jews. There's gunshots going everywhere. People are being shot in the streets. Jews are being taken out of their homes, brought to camps. And this little girl is just walking without her mommy and daddy aimlessly through this little town square. And Stephen was like, how do I get you to really see the entire Holocaust through the perspective of one little girl? You don't know her name. You don't know what happened to her. You don't know what will happen to her. All you know is, for this moment, I want you emotionally to connect with this little girl, because I want you to see the story through a relation with her. But that's not the only time he uses color in the movie. He uses it 2 other times. You remember? Anyone remember what it is?
The shoe.
The what?
The shoe?
No. Shabbos candles.
Uh-huh.
There's a scene where their Shabbos candles are lit, and it was his decision to make those in color also. Well, that's a religious thing, Shabbos, isn't it? Right? It's not just the Holocaust. This is religious. That's Shabbos. That's Torah. That's God. That's where he has deep inside him. He has this, his neshama knows that there's something beautiful here. And he knows that Shabbos is the light. The Torah is the light. And as a creative artist, he was able to express that through film and share that with all of us. And of course, at the end is the last color scene. You have all the scene at the end when all the survivors in the movie, the actors, are walking. They're walking, the ones that are saved, and all of a sudden it turns from black and white to color, and it's the real survivors.
Right.
And they're walking over that hill in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, and they're walking in color. And what he did so beautifully is he showed us that this past is not just our present, but it's our destiny and it's our future. So I even though we all know that Steven Spielberg does embrace his Jewish identity, I don't want anyone to overlook the depth and the spirituality that he has tapped into and brought ultimately to the world. Really, really beautiful.
That is beautiful. Saul, thank you for your time. This has been enlightening and challenging, thought-provoking, and inspiring. And we're just so grateful for your time. We're grateful for you. We're grateful for what you're doing through Momentum and other opportunities. And everyone's got to tune into that podcast for sure. And we just wish you a lot of bracha and hatzlacha in continuing to uplift and entertain and inspire in all the ways that you do. And we're just really, really grateful for your time. So thank you for letting us go behind the Bima with you.
Thank you both so much. It's a huge honor for me to have had this time with the two of you. And especially, I just want to give a bit of gratitude to all the listeners who are listening. And I just want to share one final thing. You know, if you're listening to this interview or to any interview, to any TED Talk, to any drush, shir, any book you're reading, whatever it is you're inspires you, be careful if you only end with inspiration, because inspiration slips through our fingertips. One moment you hear something, you're inspired. Oh, Charlie Harari said this and uplifted me. And the next day you're like, wait, what did he say? When you hear something that means something to you, that talks to you, you need to write it down and have the moment in your day where you figure out how do you turn that inspiration into action. We have to change how we actually live our lives. That way you're not just, feeling inspired, you're living inspired. That's the goal. And ultimately, I really have one goal in life, and that is, how do we grow as a human being? How do I become a better version of myself? Well, there's only one way. Torah's Chaim, tools for living. I wish every single person listening to wake up every day, whether you're the most Reformed Jew in the world, the most Frum Jew in the world, whether you're living in Mea Sharim or living in Las Vegas. I don't care where. By the way, I know a lot of good Frum Jews that live in Las Vegas. But wherever you're living, it's how do I embrace my Jewish identity every single day to grow as a human being, to take responsibility for the world.
Wow. What a perfect place.
Thank you.
Perfect place to leave it. Saul, thank you for your time. We can look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much.
And we're back. Rabbi Broide.
Wow.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we can get behind the Bima, like a BTB logo, maybe on the next Disney or some
Winnie the Pooh. It's got BTB.
Exactly.
It's got a behind the Bima logo snuck into the next Winnie the Pooh.
So that might be the coolest thing.
That would be a big milestone. Listen, there's a lot of room to agree, disagree. A lot of food for thought about culture, pop culture. Should you let it in? Do you teach? Do you watch together? Do you try to shut it out altogether? A lot of discussion that you can have, but I don't think there's any debate about how inspiring Saul is when he talks about his journey and discovery and wanting to know his place in the Jewish people. And have you heard someone speak so passionatally about Torah? Like read the book.
You have rabbis that don't speak as passionately. I wish there were more leaders talking. And he's just a guy he's working. He's trying to support his family. Next thing you know, he's traveling around the country, around the world, trying to inspire people. So
yeah, he went from going to movies on Friday night to telling his daughter, you can't be in a movie. Who knows what you're giving up? We don't know. 7 figures, right. 8 figures. Who knows what future, what finance, what fame,
Right.
But he taught her, like, there's nothing to think about. We keep Shabbos. There's just nothing to talk about. And
So
what made
inspiring.
him go from one place to the other is Torah. It's the role of Torah. It's what Torah does.
And he's the real deal, because I've seen him on these trips, and I see when he talks in front of hundreds of men, and they just it's like a breath of fresh air. They've never heard anything like it before. And knowing that he's not just about, like, sometimes, people will criticize, oh, you get inspired and then it's done. He's like, no, I'm not the inspiration. I'm living inspired. It's about making sure that you don't just take the inspiration and then dump it. It's let's keep going. So
yeah, what's interesting is there are a lot of Baalei Tshuva who it sort of slows down or can wear off. They're amazing journeys, and they're amazing inspiration to me. Every time you meet a Baal Tshuva who's radically changed their life to embrace what so many others are running away from, it's inspiring. But there are people. I didn't know him then, but I feel like he's as much more on fire now than he was when he first discovered observant Jewish life. And he wants everyone else to taste it. He wants everyone else to be part of it. He wants everyone else to benefit from it. That's really impressive.
it's great. I love how he just uses his career as a platform to advance the message. It's such a great move, and I think all of us can do that. Yeah, what a story.
You wear a yarmulke, and then the people around you stop cursing and apologize.
Right.
And you don't have to say a word. You just have to be the role model. Be
Right.
that person.
And I think instinctively many of us will try be in that world. Like, we know people in our community. Some were wearing yarmulkes to work. You've spoken about your father. I spoke about my father. Right back in the day, things were different, whether they did and they didn't.
Right.
But today you live in a world where you can get away with it, but many still try to hide it, know, and not feature it. And you don't realize it's a great opportunity. You never know what's going to happen just as a result of that. Right.
You could be in Hollywood and you don't have to be apologetic or defensive.
Right.
And I agree. There is no judgment of anyone in the past. The world looked very different then, and the threat and the danger and the risk was much greater then. But today, and we're seeing anti-Semitism on the rise from that perspective. But in terms of career and opportunity, here's somebody who's very successful, but he's not apologetic or defensive.
Right.
He wears that yarmulke, and that very subtly changes environments that he's in. And that's a really beautiful and powerful thing, and should cause all of us to think about what difference can we make? What is our legacy?
Right.
And how do we want to be remembered?
Specifically in the Hollywood world, which I guess there's a disproportionate number of Jews, certainly, that founded Hollywood. I don't know what the numbers are today, but is it still considered a very Jewish world, even maybe more ish than Jewish, Jew, but he's definitely part of it.
He is there. We're gonna have to leave it right there. It's been another great episode, great conversation, great evening to be together. Until next time, tell all of our listeners, stay happy, stay healthy.